we're going to be reflecting on, well, why is inclusion important? Why does it matter to us personally? Why does it matter in terms of the work that we do? So let me start with you, Fay. Why would you say inclusion mattered to you personally?
Well, inclusion matters because we as a society cannot function effectively unless everyone is valued and everyone is able to bring their unique insights and perspectives to discussions, to the debate, and to the complex changes that we're all experiencing. And for me, you can have your policies, you can have your statements, but ultimately, are you treating people with humanity? And so inclusion matters to me because I do not want my aspirations to be killed off because someone is threatened by my humanity.
I mean, obviously, all of us have personal experiences of different aspects of inequality. And I think also for me, being very aware of privilege too. And as a researcher, obviously, the accounts of the people we work with are just really powerful and just remind you every day the importance of what we're doing.
I think that inclusion is essential if we want to take advantage of the wealth of knowledges around any issue, whether it's a research issue, a policy issue, or an issue related to a specific type of practice, and being able to work with many different people coming from different places, bringing different knowledges together is a great privilege, but all too often some of those knowledges are excluded.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm nodding away and I'm thinking, yeah, absolutely. We're focusing particularly today on research and science, and just that sense of, at the moment, there's a privileged few who get to do research, a privileged few who get to benefit from research. And often the research even isn't inclusive in terms of how it looks at who's involved in the actual study. So tell me a little bit about how we can make a case for this to those who perhaps don't share our view that this really matters.
I think the case has been made time and time again. So if you take McKinsey management consultancy, so they've written a number of reports, delivering for diversity, why diversity matters. And they set out very clearly what the business benefits are, in terms of profitability and outcomes. But it's more than that. We're more innovative, we're more creative, we make better decisions. We stop seeing the world through, kind of bubbles with echo chambers, and we start to see it through a kind of a broader cultural lens. Although, yes, the private sector talk about profitability, but from a research point of view, we want better outcomes. We want health inequalities reduced. We want to see, population health improved for everyone. So there is a different business case to be made there about inclusion and why it matters.
And whose job is it then, do you think, to try and address the fact that currently the ways that we do research and science aren't necessarily being as inclusive as we all think they should be?
Anybody working in their fields in the business of knowledge production should have an interest in looking at where this knowledge is coming from and who's excluded.
For me, there's a real struggle with the kind of level of conversations we're prepared to have about, how research is funded and who gets to make decisions about research and who's in the room. I often say to researchers, who's in the room with you when you're having these conversations, research directors, who are you actually speaking to? Because if we're only speaking to people who are echoing our view of the world, then nothing's going to change.
So have any of you got an example from the practice that you work with that either has enabled you to make some of that change or is beginning to influence some of that change?
I mean, we like working with youth as co-researchers. We do lots of research about young people, so it makes sense to work with them as researchers, and also with teachers and out-of-school practitioners as co-researchers as well. I think it's enriched our understanding. There's that sort of co-learning that goes on, and it's produced better outcomes as well. I mean, it's produced better data, but also when we're designing tools, when we co-design them, it's obviously grounded in that reality and that practice, and it produces more useful tools that people have already bought into. So I think we're not unique, lots of people are doing this, but I think for us, the funding structures are often working against us because you need time, you need support, you need to be able to take risks. And I think sometimes it's that context for how can we support more of this? It's not that it doesn't exist, but how we can mainstream it more.
So how is it that you managed to get funding then?
I think we've been lucky to work with some very more forward-thinking funders who are happy to fund in a different way and to try some things out. And that has really made a difference to what we've been able to do.
That's helpful, thank you. Fay or Jude, are there a practice you'd like to talk about?
So I was just thinking about the Race Equality Public Action Group that I established within the NIHR. And the rationale behind that was because I was very acutely aware, sort of post-COVID, being relatively new in post, that we really were not hearing from Black, Asian, African and heritage and Caribbean heritage people, public members, about their experiences of health inequalities and their experiences of health and care research and what needed to be changed. And so for me, it was really important that we started to have that conversation, but to actually hold leaders to account within the NIHR for having that conversation with them, because we know there's a historical context and backdrop to everybody who's experiencing inequality. And we need to be able to talk about it, and people need to be able to express themselves in their way, not through our voice, because we reframe, don't we? We reframe and we minimize and we dismiss and, we ignore things that are uncomfortable for us. And so for me, it was important that we're going to have these conversations. It's Chatham House. It's going to be open. It's going to be challenging. You're going to feel uncomfortable, but it needs to happen. This is a starting point for change.
So that sounds quite a challenging thing to set up. So you're relatively new in post. You're wanting to bring in voices that haven't been included for whatever reason in those discussions. Do you want to reflect on what was perhaps most challenging about that, or get under the skin a bit?
Most challenging, that's a really good question, Sophie. Because there were a number of challenges. Obviously, one being new in post, I haven't built the relationships with anyone, and I'd never heard of the NIHR prior to coming into this organisation. So that was difficult. No established relationships. It's who are you, what do you want, what can you deliver? Do you have any? Are you even competent? You're kind of dealing with that as a newbie within any new organisation. So that was challenging. Then it was the fear of the unknown that you're dealing with. Well, what is this group? Is it an activist group? What is it? No, we're not going to kind of go out there and sort of wave banners. We're actually going to be quite strategic. It is going to be about honest conversations, and we are going to be about practical changes that we can make and influencing the wider research sector as much as we can. So it's getting over that kind of fear of the unknown.
And yet you did manage to navigate them, and actually stubbornness. This is one of the qualities we need to cultivate, the stubbornness. Let me come to you, Jude.
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of these experiences, even though the context of my work is quite different. I think the big change in my own work was moving away from more abstract and transnational research networks to very place-based research. And part of that happened just before COVID around a research program that I set up in my local council estate, which brought together a really wide range of different groups of residents, different embedded organisations, schools, sheltered accommodation, food banks, local government, park trust, migrant centres. And we looked at developing a community-based research training programme to really establish what agendas were important to those residents living on the estate. Through that, we trained some key researchers and identified 4 areas around social housing and food, social care, and migration and the environment. And this led to a number of collaborations with universities, with different types of organisation, with the local government, to develop agendas which had a research element, but also were targeted to concrete action. And it's made a big difference in terms of understanding what research is. When you start within a university as an institution, you have a series of assumptions about how research works. You develop a proposal, you apply for funding, that dictates who your partners are. You do the research, you think about dissemination in terms of what the requirements are from the university. But starting outside of the university and thinking about those place-based agendas really challenges that notion of what research is.
So how do we manage that when we have communities now who have developed the skills, are active and keen to do research, but now they either want to take those skills into other places and other communities, or they want to become, the next Louise Archer within an institution?
I mean, in my experience, a lot of the work that we do is in collaboration with different universities, and there have been opportunities to bring in some of our community researchers into university programs as guest lecturers, to be co-supervisors on dissertations, to benefit from the resources that universities have, and even to be critical friends when academics are negotiating their research agendas. I do think it depends on the university, on the department, on the team or individual, and especially if funders can incentivize it by specifically mandating it in a call or having a call around it, then it can be quite an exciting opportunity.